shortly, then you come back. But for us, we shall continue with the deliberations here. I told you we are having Group 2 here. We are having Universal Link High School, Indian Quarters and Forest-based school, versing Bilal, Nakaloke based. So we are waiting for the battle. And for me, as an MC, I'm off stage.
Right away, I want to clarify the resolution. We bring our arguments, allow me to clarify what this house is proposing. When we say teach students to question authority, we do not mean teaching students to insult teachers, disrespect parents, reject rules, or encourage rebellions. What we mean is teaching students the ability to respectfully examine decisions, ask for reasons, challenge ideas using evidences, and seek better solutions when something does not make sense. As I continue our judges, core competence means this is not an occasional activity, but a key skill that every learner should develop, just like communication, problem solving, and literacy. As I continue our judges, therefore, our debate is not about destroying respect. It is about creating responsible respect. Allow me to give the model of the resolution. How this policy works. This house proposes that who will implement this policy. The Ministry of Education and Sports, together with the schools and teachers, will integrate questioning skills into the Ugandan education system. As I continue over the students will be taught how to ask meaningful questions, how to challenge ideas with evidences, how to respectfully disagree, how to evaluate vocational before accepting it. As I continue over this also, here is how will this happen. This will happen through classroom discussion, inquiry-based learning, debates, research programs. As I continue over judges, teaching will not lose authority. Instead, they will become facilitators. Teachers will not lose authority. Instead, they will become facilitators who guide students to think critically. When we speak, when will this policy be implemented? This policy will be implemented gradually through curriculum reforms and teacher preparation over time, allowing schools to adapt successfully. As I continue my judges, why is this policy needed? Because Uganda needs students who can think, innovate, solve problems, and participate responsibly in society. Not just students who just come to just pass education. As I continue my judges, the status quo shows that currently, many Ugandan schools operate in a system where authority is often viewed as something that should never be challenged. I say, why? Many students are trained to listen, memorize, reproduce information in examination. The teacher is often seen as the person who has the answer, while students are expected to simply receive knowledge. In many cases, a student who frequently asks why or challenges an explanation be labeled as stubborn, disrespectful, or difficult. As I want to is here, the problem is in the status quo. The problem is blind obedience. When students are never told to question, first they fail to develop independent thinking, and they become people who can remember information but struggle to analyze problems and create solutions. Secondly, they become vulnerable to misinformation and manipulation because they accept information simply because it comes from someone powerful. As I continue, thirdly, they grow into adults who fear challenging poor decisions in workplace, communities, and government. A society that discourages questions.
Point of information, Speaker.
Hello?
Why should questioning authority be a core competence instead of critical thinking, innovation, and problem solving?
Let me tell you, this problem requires young people who can ask relevant questions that can enable them get workable solutions, that can enable them to solve existing challenges. That's why we say it should be a core competence. As I continue with judges, a society that discourages questions creates citizens who wait for instruction instead of citizens who create changes. As I continue, the necessity, why is this necessary? This policy is necessary because Uganda's challenge cannot be solved by people who can only follow existing methods. Uganda faces problems such as unemployment, corruption, environmental challenges. That's why I say that this problem requires people who can ask relevant questions that can enable them get workable solutions that can to solve existing challenges. This requires a core competency. I beg to submit.
Thank you, Speaker. Let's welcome a speaker from Open their case.
As the negative, we do not oppose thinking and asking genuine questions to the authority. Rather, we oppose making questioning of authority a core competence in the Ugandan schools. We believe schools should produce disciplined, respectful, responsible, and thoughtful citizens who know when and how to raise concerns through appropriate channels rather than treating authority with automatic suspicion. Mati Ibrahim is my name from the opposition. Judges and the August House, allow me break down some of the keywords in the motion. Ugandan schools. These are all formal education institutions in Uganda, including government, private, and faith-based primary, secondary, and tertiary institutions that follow the national curriculum. Teach students to question authority is the deliberate training of learners to challenge decisions, instructions, beliefs, or actions of people in position of authority instead of accepting them without thought. But most importantly, I think we have to understand the authority. We may think that we are talking of politicians only, but the authority, we mean the teachers. We mean the student leaders. We mean the parents, the guardians, elders, religious leaders, cultural leaders, our employers, among others. A core competence is a fundamental skill, ability, knowledge or value that every learner is expected to develop because it is essential for success in school, work, and life. For example, critical thinking is fundamental. Communication skills is what we are using here today. We also speak of teamwork as we are cooperating as teams. We also speak of self-management. In simple terms, the debate is not about whether Ugandan schools should make questioning authority one of the most important skills students must learn. We believe schools should instead prioritize critical thinking, respect for legitimate authority, discipline, and responsible ways of raising concerns rather than making questioning authority itself a core competency. The current Ugandan education system already promotes values such as critical thinking, problem solving, patriotism, discipline, and respect through the competence-based curriculum. Students are encouraged to ask questions during lessons, participate in debates, student leadership, and report concerns through school procedures. At the same time, schools emphasize respect for teachers, parents, and other lawful authorities to maintain order and conducive learning environment. The debate concerns formal Ugandan institutions of learning, legitimate authorities such as the teachers, parents, and lawful public officers. The debate is not about whether students should ask questions at all, should not ask questions at all. It is about whether questioning authority should become a core competency every student must have in Uganda. Instead of introducing a new core competence called questioning authority, schools should strengthen critical thinking within existing subjects, teach students to raise concerns through proper school channels, promote dialogue, respect, responsibility, and conflict resolution, train teachers to encourage respectful classroom discussions without undermining respect, strengthening guidance and counseling services to help students express concerns appropriately. The beneficiaries of the negative shall be primary schools, secondary school students, among others, teachers, parents, and guardians, the wider Ugandan society. The implementation shall be supported by the government of Uganda, Ministry of Education and Sports, National Curriculum Development Center, school management, and development partners in education. Judges, the proposition came and told us that students will be empowered to address their concerns through questioning the authority. Abuse of power is best addressed through strong accountability systems, clear reporting procedures, and enforcement policies, not just changing a curriculum. If changing the curriculum is the solution, then we are not addressing the problems in a right way. Judges, allow me explain one of the arguments from the opposition, which is it undermines respect for legitimate authority. Schools should build respect for lawful and legitimate authority, not making questioning authority a central skill. Imagine you're a parent, then you're a child of around 5 years or 10 years, because they have been taught in schools to question authority. Then he comes and asks you, Daddy, what do you always do in your bedroom with mommy at night? Because they have been taught to be questioning authority. I said, authority is not only the politicians in the offices we have elected, but also the parents are authority. The religious leaders. Could you go to your religious leader, your imam, your pastor, and ask him why the Bible or the Quran is this and that? So I think prioritizing this, making questioning authority a core competency is not something important. Rather, we should just implement discipline and respect for the children we are having. Also, judges and the August House, schools have more fundamental priorities. They have to teach.
Okay, can you conclude in 1 second?
They have to teach literacy and numeracy instead of prioritizing these other issues. These are the fundamental skills every person should have so that they can succeed in life. Thank you.
Can we have second speaker from your raised hand?
Honorable judges, worthy opponents, and the entire House at large, a good afternoon. Gega Okasha is my name. I'm here specifically to emphasize our case and also rebuttal and also lay our arguments to the House. One, dear judges, as I proceed in my speech, one of the speakers, who is the N1, has come here clearly and said that, and was arguing like that this questioning as a competence in the school will increase or will introduce disrespect for the authority. But in fact, the opposition's assumption is like that the authority, what authority decides should be the last thing. And we, the negator, and we, the affirmers, come in and therefore give an option. And we say, if somebody gives a wrong, if an authority decides on a wrong thing, it must be questioned, and that questioning should give the right directives of it. So you cannot tell me that somebody will decide something wrong because he's elder than you, and you fail to question because that person is older than you. No, you should question so that you get really what was the intention and how is it benefiting, despite the fact that it is wrong. What the opposition is not understanding. The other thing is like, they claim that, in fact, we introducing that thing, we are trying to change the curriculum.
Point of information, Speaker.
Terminated. That we are trying to change the curriculum, but that's not our intention. Our intention as the proposition is that we are trying to make the curriculum a better learning center, whereby students have the right to question and get directly what the right information they need for prosperity, but not changing the curriculum as your assumption. And the other thing that you said, you came here and commented on one thing which was somehow, we agreed with it, but not at a much extent, whereby you said that this thing of questioning already exists in the curriculum. We agree, but at a less extent. But how effective it is? How effective is it? We come to realize that this thing existing in the curriculum, we don't deny, but already students don't use it. Why? Because they fear what we call authority. That fear which has been brought up from many years, that learners fear to consult the authorities. Instead, you came and gave us even an option that they should use proper school channels for school channels. But what you don't know is that these proper school channels, as you have said, for example, the suggestion boxes at school, these things here delay information. But when we introduce questioning as a competency, this one will increase on what we call direct reply. It will prevent a delay of information. A learner can ask what he or her concern is, and at that particular point, she gets the reply. But what the opposition is not getting about that.
Point
Honorable
of information,
judges,
Speaker.
denied. Honorable judges, our first argument is that, as I proceed in my speech, our first argument is that teaching students to question authority creates independent thinkers rather than persuasive followers. The primary purpose of education is not simply to produce students who can respect information, but to produce citizens who can understand, analyze, and evaluate and solve problems in the society. A country develops because a country does not develop because there is obedience of the authority blindly. But dear judges, this questioning authority does not mean rejecting every instruction, or disrespecting teachers as they thought, or parents as their assumption was, but it means teaching students to ask thoughtful questions such as, why is this true? Evidence to support this, as my first speaker already talked about it. Dear judges, here is another way to solve this problem, but not as the opposition states. When students are encouraged as to questions and engage more deep to questions, they engage deeply with what they are learning. Instead of memorizing answers just to pass exams, they understand
Point of
concepts.
information.
Please, I'll give you in the last minutes. They understand concepts, pass exams. They pass exams and also apply the real life and also apply the knowledge in the real life situations to solve community problems. This is the foundation of critical thinking and innovation, not as disrespect as the opposition claimed. Dear judges, the problem as by the status quo, as my first speaker stated, that in many Ugandan schools, teaching is still dominated by rote learning, whereby students are expected to sit quietly, listen to teachers, memorize notes, and apply them in examinations. And in exams, those who ask many questions are looked over or are looked at as those people who respect authorities, as they said. But if this is introduced, it creates several problems, including students becoming dependent on teachers for answers instead of learning to think independently. Our dear judges, I beg the House to support the resolution.
The honorable judges, colleagues in battle, ladies and gentlemen, a good afternoon. I am Baluka Precious Glory from Universal Link High School, and I stand at the second of the opposition. It is always said that a child who is told to go and ask why will sleep outside. Let me begin with your point where you say that teaching students to question authority as a core competence will create independent thinking. Did you know that independence is a result and a product of critical thinking, evidence, and reasoning? Okay, that may be one. You also argued in one of your points that questioning the authority promotes innovation, but this is just still misleading. Innovation comes from creativity, scientific inquiry, perseverance, and problem solving. A student can constantly challenge teachers, parents, or leaders. A country with strong education system succeed because they balance curiosity with discipline and respect. If I want to inquire something from the administration, in schools we have protocol that we have to follow. We have that student's body, those are the prefects. If I want something in my class, I'll go to the prefect will take the information to the administration, meaning I am following protocol, not just going direct to the administration, which will cause chaos and bring problems in the relationship. Secondly, if you argue that questioning authority protects democracy, then what about the three things that democracy cannot do without? Because democracy cannot do without lawful institutions, it cannot do without a dialogue, and it cannot do without civic responsibility, which comes before criticism. If I'm to explain, we have the courts, the police, the parliament, and even school rules only work if we obey them. If every student questions every instruction, there will be no assembly, no exams, no order. Ugandan laws and institutions are what protects us. Questioning without respect is like an anarchy. Listening to others is more important than just shutting down authority. The chair, allow me to present one of my points. Which says, I'll start from where my first speaker said, schools have more fundamental priorities. Yes, questioning matters, but schools have more fundamental priorities that come first, or else questioning becomes useless and dangerous. Schools exist first to build literacy and numeracy. You don't question a budget if you cannot read it, and you don't do math. Character and civic responsibility, respect for follow, a flag and institutions. Without this, questioning turns into indiscipline, where we have the life skills, problem solving, listening, teamwork, critical thinking. These are broader than just questioning authority. If we make questioning authority a core competency, we put the roof before the foundation. And effective education requires students to ask questions in order to learn. You said if they are in class, they will not be able to ask questions. But it also requires them to follow reasonable instructions so that teaching can take place. Without this, balanced classroom management becomes difficult and learning suffers. He also argued that critical thinking is broader, more appropriate competence because it includes questioning authority, but also analyzing, problem solving, listening, and making responsible does not doubting. I beg to rest my case.
Okay, thank you. Can we have the speaker from the Islamic School?
Thank you very much for this chance granted. However much, allow me to begin right away. Now, the team negators, what I've really observed, you're just giving us your assumptions. You're just claiming on us. Because I've really observed what they're talking is not in session what already my colleagues have already addressed onto the house. They are coming here, they are giving purpose that we have not yet talked about, yes. And otherwise, they are claiming that instead of introducing, they should use what already exists to improve on thinking. Do you mean core competence will not do so? And in fact, this one will do better because it will build more than that's existing. This is why we are going to have the confidence being built and the shyness is going to take away. Don't you think this one is going to work more better, even though the other one already exists? So allow me begin right away. It does not take me away from the right path of the resolution tonight. So, ladies and gentlemen, the curriculum they're talking about, yes, we do agree as the team negators, it already exists, but it's not effective. It's not effective because here we find that learners are very shy indeed. Now, this is whereby the negator one came here and talked about a student asking a parent what they do and so on. But here, we're not talking about, that's what I've told you, you're just claiming on your assumptions. We are not saying that those are the questions they should ask. It already exists, but not effective. As I have said, that it's not effective because they are shy. So, should integrate to be a core competence so that every child who leaves the school should have rights to question. And remember, it comes with confidence. That's why it should be made a more competence. And that's how with the team affirmatives, we do believe that this one can work more better than the one that's already existing. You're also claiming that it will help in critical thinking and so on. But this one, it will put in more effort than the way you think. Honorable judges, these people came here and talked about there is the factors that creativity and innovation is done that helps all. But now let me first ask you, do you know the factors that build up creativity and innovation? The first factor is about inquiring. How best do you know something? Go and look for more so that you can. So now if you are here and you are claiming that creativity cannot work on this, my dear, that's the major factor that brings up creativity, meaning your point falls down. So the opposition says that this will make students disrespectful. That is not true. We are not saying students should insult or disobey teachers, as we have already talked about. Parents or leaders, we are saying they should learn to ask respectful questions and think for themselves. And as I say, I like the way they have analyzed that authority is not all about the politics. Yeah. So here the parents also are supposed to also be questioned, and by the way, this also makes the child to be vibrant and also have to make the child's head have a higher thinking capacity. That is responsibility, not disrespectful. Now, they go more further and say like it goes against the culture. They may claim, but respect and critical thinking can exist together. A respectful student can still ask, why is this the rule? Is there a better way? That is how people learn and improve. Those are the questions we are talking about, learning questions, not questions like the ones you have assumed. So now, good teachers also encourage questions. You are talking about like, they should prohibit this, they should do this and this. But remember, a grown-up real person, in fact, they don't always encourage us to ask questions, you know? And even here, we can use the debate you are using. As we used to complete the rounds, there could be like any question. So don't you think this was not all about that they were promoting disrespect, but now they were just helping to build on our confidence that we should also think at a higher pace. Not only that, but if we look at the clash of this resolution, respect versus questioning, there is a big difference between questioning and disrespecting. If I ask my teacher to explain a rule, I'm not being rude, I am trying to understand. Respect means how you ask, not whether you ask, you know? So now, if I'm asking, it doesn't mean that like I'm trying to disrespect someone, but in a good way. That's how simple we are trying to say. So if we also look at the blind obedience versus informed respect, the opposition wants students to obey without asking questions. We want students to respect authority while understanding the reasons behind decisions. Respect with understanding is stronger than blind obedience. Now let me ask you, so you're like claiming like we should just be silent. So meaning being silent, that is the one that promotes respect. It will give you a no. So now, even if the opposition is right that some students may misuse this skill, the benefits are much greater. Millions of students will develop critical thinking, become responsible citizens, and contribute positively to Uganda. Our outcome is more likely. Schools already teach students to ask questions in class. Teaching respectful questions is more natural extension, not a radical change. That's why we are encouraging that it should be a core competence. Then, if we look at the root cause here, the opposition treats silence as a solution. We address the root problem at the end of the day by teaching students how to think critically and communicate respectfully. Judges, even if you believe some of the opposition's concerns, our benefits are bigger, last longer, and affect more people. Therefore, the motion should stand, not fall. That's why we are disagreeing with the team negators. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we have the speaker from University High School?
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Honorable judges, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. My name is Lunyolofa Shakira, a student at University Link High School. I read that the third speaker from the negative side to oppose the motion that states Ugandan schools should teach students to question authority as a core competence. First and foremost, allow me to rebut on what the affirmative have just presented. Firstly, the proposition repeatedly argued that teaching students to question authority as a core competence is necessary to fight corruption and abuse of power. However, throughout this debate, they failed to prove that corruption exists because students are not taught to question authority. Corruption persists because of weak enforcement of laws, poor accountability systems, and unethical leadership, not because schools have failed to make questioning authority a central competence declined. The solution is to strengthen integrity, ethics, civic responsibility, and the rule of law. These are the qualities that produce citizens who challenge wrongdoing responsibly rather than questioning authority for its own sake. Declined. Secondly, the proposition argued that questioning authority creates courageous and independent thinkers. We agree that courage and independent thinking are important. However, independence is the product of critical thinking, evidence-based reasoning, and sound judgment. It does not require evaluating questioning authority above every other educational objectives. Allowed.
So, Honorable, thank you very much. You're here claiming about corruption, but I don't think we talked about it. Did we talk about it?
Honorable, allow me to educate you. I think it was the slip of your ears. The second affirmer spoke about corruption. You can ask him, please. So, in fact, students who are taught to think critically already know when authority should be questioned and when it should be respected. The proposition never explained why existing critical thinking education is insufficient. Thirdly, the proposition attempted to portray our side as defending blind obedience. This is simply false. At no point did the opposition argue that students should obey authority without question. Our case has constantly been that schools should teach students to think critically, evaluate evidence, and challenge wrongdoing respectfully and responsibly. We reject blind obedience, just as we reject making suspicion of authority a core educational value. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me examine the key clashes in this debate. The first clash is about the purpose of education. The proposition believes education should center on questioning authority. We believe education should produce balanced, responsible citizens equipped with critical thinking, integrity, discipline, communication, and problem-solving skills. Questioning authority is only one possible outcome of those broader competencies. It should not become the competence itself. Overvision is more balanced because it prepares students to know both when to question and when to cooperate. Society needs both. The second clash is about consequences for schools and society. The proposition assumes students will always question authority wisely. They ignore the reality that learners differ in maturity and judgment. By making questioning authority a core competence, schools risk encouraging unnecessary confrontation, weakening classroom discipline, and reducing trust in legitimate institutions. Our side protects both accountability and social order. We create citizens who challenge Guinean injustice without undermining respect of lawful authority. The third clash is about solving Uganda's real education challenges. The proposition diverts limited educational time and resources towards a competence that is already covered under critical thinking and civic education. We argue that Uganda should instead strengthen literacy, digital skills, entrepreneurship, ethics, leadership, and problem solving. These competences improve both individual opportunity and national development while still enabling students to exploit wrongdoing when necessary. Honorable adjudicators, the proposition gives you a society where questioning becomes the goal. We give you a society where good judgment is the goal. Good judgment naturally includes questioning wrongdoing, but it also includes respecting legitimate authority. That is the more balanced, practical, and educational sound model. For those reasons, the oppositions win this debate. We win this debate because we defended a balanced education rather than an extreme one. Okay. The proposition asks Uganda schools to define education around questioning authority. We ask schools to develop wise citizens who know when to question, how to question, and why to question, while also knowing when cooperation, respect, and trust are essential for society to function. For those few, I proudly negate the motion. Thank you.
Now can I have a press speech from Investor?
Thank you, judges. Following the fact that the motion is all about schools and students, meaning we are dealing with young people. Being in school means that you're still young. And if at all we encourage these students, these young people, to question authority, are they not going to follow their emotions when questioning, reaching an extent that question things that are unnecessary because they are following their emotions? And the fact is, these people are still young. They are not able to reason and question the appropriate thing. They say that the proposition urges that questioning authority promotes critical thinking. We agree that students should think critically. However, critical thinking does not require making questioning authority itself a target in schools. Ugandan schools already teach analysis through subjects such as sciences, literature, history, and political education. Students can evaluate ideas, evidence, and policies without being trained to challenge each and every authority.
Directly on what the first speaker has spoken about, that we don't, these people don't have the ability to think. Do you want to tell me that you don't have the responsibility to think right now as you're there? You have the ability to think. You have the ability to decide. So you can't lie to us. As I continue, honorable judges, we have not talked about corruption, but the negators have come here to put the problem, their burden onto us. So therefore, we disagree with that. As I continue, when we say teach students to question authorities, we do not mean teaching students to insult teachers, as all speakers have already given their arguments. So therefore, I tell you that we are not teaching We are not teaching students to insult teachers, disrespect parents, or reject our rules. We encourage rebellions, but we are building people who will ask you questions that will benefit their lives. So that's why we are saying that we should introduce this question authority as a core competence in Uganda schools. And allow me to submit.
I welcome the members from that wonderful show. And at this, let me read out the assessment. I'll start with Bilal Islamic High School. From one judge, we had 66, 75, and 86. That makes a total of 227. From another judge, we had 78, 72, and 84. That makes a total of 234. And from a third judge, we had 84, 70, and 86, to total to 240. When you add 227 plus 234 plus 240, you get 701. University Link High School, from one judge, we had 78, 84, and 80. That makes it 242. From another judge, we had 85, 81, and 86 to make 252. And then from our third judge, we had 73, 88, and 90 to make 251. When you add 242 plus 252 plus 251, you get a total of 745. It is 745 for University Link against 701 for Bilal Islamic High School. To that, I declare University Link High School as the victor.